while the foundations of local government were eroded. I mean, on that record, honestly, I'd keep the advice to myself if I were him.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have Birmingham Labour MPs campaigning for a new airport in Pakistan. Meanwhile, we have rats the size of cats in Birmingham feasting on a month's worth of rubbish courtesy of the trade union friends of the party opposite. Simple question to the Minister. When is this rubbish going to be cleared?
Minister.
Well, we both share the intention and the ambition that as soon as possible. There should not be any further delay in reaching agreement when it's quite clear, with the volume of waste that's being collected, that is proving to be a waste hazard. And he will know, with his background as a councillor, that it's for the council as a local employer to resolve this with the trade unions by agreement, and that's what we want.
Can I thank the Minister for his statement this afternoon? The Clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Non-domestic rating, multipliers and private schools bill. Consideration of Lord's message.
Now, I must draw the House's attention to the fact that financial privilege is engaged by Lord's Amendments 1B, 2B, 7B and 8B, and by Lord's Amendments 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E, to the words restored to the bill by the Lords' non-insistence on their Amendment 15. If any of these Lords' amendments are agreed to, I will cause the customary entry, waiving Commons financial privilege, to be entered in the Journal. We will begin with the Government motion to disagree with Lords' Amendment 1B, which we will consider together with the motions to disagree with Lords' Amendments 2B, 7B, 8B, 13B and 15B, 15C, 15D and 15E, as on the selection paper. I call the Minister to move the motion to disagree with Lords' Amendment 1B. Jim.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House disagrees with Lords' Amendment 1B. I'm grateful for the opportunity to consider the new Lords' amendments tabled in lieu of the previously disagreed ones by this House. I would like to reiterate my thanks to the Lords and honourable members across both Houses for their continued diligence and scrutiny of these measures. As set out previously, this bill makes provision to enable the introduction of permanent lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses from April 2026, ending the uncertainty of the temporary RHL relief. The RHL relief stopgap measure creates uncertainty for businesses, as well as a significant fiscal pressure on the government. And so this government is committed to addressing that through this bill. This government faces a significant challenge that we must balance the books, and so we cannot and should not make tax cuts without ensuring that those tax cuts are funded, which is why the bill also makes provision to enable the introduction of a higher multiplier for all properties with a rateable value at or above £500,000, ensuring that the permanent tax cut from RHL properties is sustainably funded from within the business rate system itself. This bill also helps deliver on another of the government's missions set out in the manifesto in breaking down barriers to opportunity. This bill will remove the eligibility for charitable rate relief from private schools that are charities in England. As I said before in this House, the government believes in parental choice, but it's also determined to fulfil the aspiration of every parent to get the best education for their child. To eliminate the barriers to opportunity, we need to concentrate on the broader picture towards the state sector, where, let's remember, over 90% of children are educated. The revenue raised through the removal of charitable relief will help to deliver on our commitments to education and young people, and help us to meet our overarching mission of breaking down barriers to opportunity for all. Amendments 1B and 7B seek to allow the Treasury to exclude healthcare arrangements from the higher multiplier through regulations. Amendments 2B and 8B seek to allow the Treasury to exclude anchor stores from the higher multipliers through regulations. Now, these amendments are unnecessary, as the powers that they seek already exist in the bill. Let me be clear, the powers within the bill already allow the government, should it so choose, to exclude certain properties from the higher multiplier. This is not the intention, of course, as I've set out. The government's intention is for the higher multiplier to apply to all properties at or above the £500,000 threshold, to ensure that local multipliers can be adequately funded. As such, I urge the House to reject these amendments because they're not required and duplicate powers that already exist within the bill. I now turn to address Amendment 13B, tabled by Lord Thurlow. Amendment 13B would require the Government to undertake a review on how the provisions within the Act may impact businesses whose rateable value is close to the £500,000 threshold. The Amendment 13B requires that this review be laid before Parliament within 6 months of the date in which the Act is passed. Further, Amendment 13B also sets out that this review must consider the merits of a separate use class and associated multipliers for retail services provided by fulfilment warehouses that do not have a material presence on local high streets. Now, we've considered 2 similar Lords amendments previously, and our position has not changed. The amendment is unnecessary. The Transforming Business Rates work currently underway recognises the cliff edge within the business rate system and that they may act as a disincentive to expand. I will reiterate the assurance I previously provided to the House. The Government is already looking at this precise issue. The second part of Amendment 13B would require the Government to undertake a review. This will examine the merits of creating a separate use class in business rates and associated multiplier for warehouses that cater for retailers without a material presence on the high street. Again, as previously set out, the Government is already exploring that objective through the existing project mentioned before. The Digitalising Business Rate project will allow us to match property-level data within the business-level data held by HMRC. This will improve the way in which we target business rates. Therefore, the Government remains of the view, for the reasons set out, that the amendment is not required. I urge honourable members to disagree to this amendment. The Government is fully committed to transforming the business rate system. This is simply the first step of a wider programme of change for a system that is long overdue for reform. The Chancellor set out at the Spring Statement last week that the Government will publish an interim report that will set out a clear direction of travel for reform, with further policy detail to follow at the autumn budget, as I previously said. Reforms to the business rate system will be phased in over the Parliament. Now finally, Amendments 15B to 15E seek to move the measure to remove the chargeable rate relief from private schools, one being made by Parliament in this bill, to one that would be made by the statutory state through regulations, subject to the affirmative resolution procedure for that statutory instrument. The Government is committed to delivering on its manifesto commitments, and part of that is removing the chargeable rate relief from private schools. To raise revenue to help deliver on our commitments to young people and education, including the state sector, where, again, as I said before, most children are educated. The Government's view is that this is a matter for Parliament to decide, which is why we've invited Parliament to do so through this bill. Therefore, the amendments are unnecessary. And so, for the reasons set out, this Government cannot accept these amendments, and we ask the House to vote to disagree with the amendments as stated.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1B. Shadow Secretary of State, Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank their noble lordships for their diligent further consideration of the Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers and Private Schools Bill 2025 and for the new amendments they have tabled to address the concerns on the legislation. These changes shine a spotlight on Labour's muddled priorities, exposing an approach which punishes aspiration, squeezes business and increases the cost of living for consumers and the cost of doing business. This very week we'll see the new job tax introduced, business rate hikes, the Employment Rights Bill coming down the line, which is of great concern to many private sector businesses. And for consumers, this will see consequent higher prices, lower wages, and also tomorrow's hike in council tax, energy prices, water bills, broadband and BBC licence fee. I'll address the 4 primary groups of amendments in turn. First, there's a turn to Lord's Amendment 1B and 7B, which tackle the proposal to levy a higher multiplier on medical, dental and other healthcare settings. These amendments prudently protect all healthcare premises occupied or vacant from the higher multiplier, addressing a glaring flaw in Labour's bill. For too long, we've cautioned against their detachment from practical governance, and now it's undeniable. Rather than targeting the untaxed profits of internet giants as pledged, they're heaping costs onto hospitals and GP surgeries. It is baffling that Labour's so-called reform of the rating system would burden healthcare at all, let alone while they plan to hike